Welcome, everyone. I am Enrique Acosta Gonzales, and I'm joined by Ashkan Tashvir. And in this episode, we will be speaking about balancing short term performance or gains with long term development. And Ashkan, the long game in business is where we are challenged the most, especially when we're looking for short term wins.
Oh, hello, Enrique, and hello, everyone. One more time, we're with you. And as Enrique mentioned, the topic today is balancing short term wins with the long term growth, which basically is one of the greatest, biggest challenges for leaders they're facing with today. Okay, so how about we create the context? In the being discourse, we often talk about this thing called the higher purpose. And with higher purpose, we're referring to this quality, not necessarily a particular goal or objective, but we're talking about the quality of you as a leader being able to go beyond yourself and beyond your time or beyond the current time. So the part of it is being visionary and taking other people and bigger context in dealing with the problems into consideration while making decisions, taking actions, setting directions. And the other part of it has to do with time and not being stuck in the present and being able to predict the consequences of the way that we're being, the type of decisions we're making, and the way that we are behaving as a team, as a leader, as a team, as an organization, or even as a society. We should be able to predict the consequences of how we are being at the moment, and that's going to give us the ability to catch ourselves beforehand in advance, yeah, so that we're not putting ourselves in danger or in unpleasant situations, disasters, etc., etc. Now, but then when we talk about the higher purpose, this quality I just mentioned, it is quite common to go, okay, so then we need to think long term. We need to focus on the growth that is required, especially when it comes to the human capital or the growth and transformations of individuals within a team and teams and organizations. Um, but then supporting the growth of people, the development of the people, including ourselves, obviously it's not a profit center right at that time. Yeah. So if you are a kind of person you want to prioritize instant gratification, you want immediate return, going and focusing on and investing lots of energy, time, resources in the development of the people may not necessarily be the best way. I mean, at least the way that you may perceive it. But the thing is, so some may go and then focus on that quite a lot, and the other people, the other leaders may prioritize more um, instant, short-term gains. So let me pose this question now. Now that we have created the context, some are going this way and some are going that way. Let me ask you this question, Enrique. Which one do you think that is more important?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? Which one
Yeah.
is more important? As a developer of people, obviously, I would have a tug on, hey, center on the people. They're the ones completing the task, they're the ones completing the mission. If they complete the mission and they're well equipped and trained, then the results will be even more impactful and maybe more profitable because we all know that impact doesn't really equate to money and gain. It is we talked about it, the long game is where we have plans for these financial increases. But from the perspective of a leadership developer, I always say, hey, invest in the people, they'll get you there. But
Yeah.
we all know that companies, organizations often have investors, and those
Yeah.
investors don't have the time. or the flexibility to wait for you to build your people up, right? They say, hey, get the people already ready and they'll do the great job and we'll get the best money. So, but
Yeah.
I always think investment in people is probably the best thing to do.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So, whoever is familiar with my body of work, they know that I'm a firm believer of people development. So I literally assert that in order for you to grow your company, you need to build people. You build people, you support people building themselves, developing themselves, and then they're going to build the business that you so love. Yeah. But at the same times, while we know that there is extreme value, I mean, there's so much value, tremendous amount of value in long-term development, and while we acknowledge that it's extremely important to invest in people, invest in infrastructure, focus on building better mental models, processes, procedures, and ways to do things quite effectively. Um, like we not much more I can emphasize on the importance of building capabilities, fostering the culture of learning and preparing for industry trades, and focusing on our um, skill sets, like making them up to date, etc., etc. But as you mentioned, there is a tremendous amount of significance and importance to short-term performance as well. So sometimes it's like it's like marathon, but then sometimes you need to perform in short distance running, and both type of performance is extremely important. And I think as the topic we chose for this episode suggests, balancing these two and discerning which one you need to focus on in which period of, or what amount of your energy and effort needs to be in shorter term gains, and what amount of it needs to be in a longer term wins. That's extremely important. That's part of being a visionary leader. Now, short-term performance is essential because it's going to keep the organization go healthy, particularly with from a financial perspective. So we need to keep the organization financially healthy, because if you really want to invest, as the name suggests, like if you want to invest in long-term goals, or long-term development, then it requires resources, it requires capital. We need to have the luxury of time so that we can actually sit there and then focus on the development of the team. So it's extremely important to have that financial health. And we sometimes, as you mentioned, like we're dealing with stakeholders, various different stakeholders, like we are the shareholders of the companies that we build most often, and immediate feedback on what's working and what's not working and what's missing is also important. Yeah. And um short-term goals, um you can see their importance in building the team momentum. Yeah. So it's like the a measure of success is like in short term performance is actually these momentum. So we're seeing what amount of growth we had, like from multiple different perspectives. Like sometimes growth is more revenue or more streams of revenue, um, because they're going to stabilize financial health of the business. And sometimes we want to see set longer term milestones, and we're going to basically go towards them. So I think that the importance of the balance now by now should have been quite clear to our audience. Yeah. And in one hand you can say that, on one hand you can say that, oh, it's obvious why when we're talking about it. Of course, this balance is important, but to my experience working with many different organizations, um, as well as studied some more, I know that we often get that wrong. I mean, it's really hard to balance that, and it's like your two legs, like as you're walking, you cannot let one go far ahead, and you need to basically keep going one of these, one of that, and that's going to create more sustainable, consistent performance in moving towards the ultimate goal that we have, the mission of the organization. Now, but and we talked about the short term, we talked about the long term, and there's a tension between the two. Yeah. So many leaders feel, especially in today's environment, many leaders feel torn between the two. Yeah. Because if we focus too much on immediate result, we might lose the sight of bigger picture. Conversely, putting too much emphasis on the future can make us less competitive now. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're competing, you're playing in a market with other players in that market. So, what do you think, Enrique? If we feel that we're being torn between the two, uh, and now we're talking about the balance. You tell me like how that balance can look. What, how does it look in action? Oh, okay, we're happy with that philosophy of balancing the two, but how does it look like in action to balance the short term and the long term? What do you have to say?
Yeah, I actually was in a position to experience that myself. I was
Mm,
hired at a company to be the in house leadership developer, which is unheard of in most places. They usually bring people in, they do on the spot kind of thing, training, meetings, and things like that. But they actually brought me on to be in house leadership developer. That was their way of investing in their people with a small amount of capital and securing somebody that could address the development needs of the people without
mm,
them jeopardizing their goals towards increase and developing the company. I thought
yeah,
it was a great idea, not just because it was me working it, but I thought it was a great idea because it immediately I heard from the people that they felt that that company truly cared about their development to even have somebody in that
yeah,
position. Now,
yeah,
there was a challenge. There was a challenge, money, right? And any organization, we're talking about profit. Once your profit starts getting eaten from one place, then you have to replace it with another. Unfortunately, my job was dissolved to meet that financial burden and it went away. So in there, you have a company that tried to manage that balance by having somebody in house, but then they were met with the obligation on the finance side. And then they did away with that spot because they can recoup that money to allocate to the need at hand. That delicate balance happens every day. And so,
yeah.
as a company, you just have to be aware of what you're willing to basically negate in order to address another thing. But you can do it. It's actually something that you can do if you plan it out right and make the right investment.
Some tangible ways that we can actually, because see, like the word is not in shortage of values or ideas, really. I think what the word is in shortage of is the ways and the methods of actualizing those values, executing on those ideas, and basically bring them to life, influencing the shared reality that we have out there. And that's a big part of the leadership. Like leaders are not intellectuals sitting there intellectualizing the word, coming up with theories. Like that's important. I'm not saying that's not important because at the end of the day, behind any effective action sits some implicit or explicit theory or idea. Now, but yeah, as a leader, you are the person in the field, and there's no doubt in that. Yeah, so you're expected to perform, and hence we keep talking about this domain of performance and leadership. Now, so let's discuss some of these tangible ways we can actually bring that to life. Yeah, so one of them is, let's call it goal alignment. So so especially like if you're a startup, if you are small to medium sized business, or if you're a smaller team, I mean a team within a larger corporation, um, so there are ways that you can align your short-term target with long-term objectives. Yeah, because that way we can ensure every action today brings us closer to the future goals. Now, what does that mean? Like, for example, you're developing a piece of software. Yeah, so you're developing a piece of software, and what you're going to do, you go, okay, so are there any ways that we can monetize a certain feature, certain initial features of this software without having the whole software being built. Yeah, because you may need months or years for the whole idea that you have to be built. Yeah, and then you're going to go, okay, let us look into this. This requires millions of dollars of investment for that software to be built, and then we can basically build a kind of business model around it, revenue model around it. But how about we break that down into smaller chunks, and we go, okay, so let's see which of these many features that we want to build are the ones that are going to create the most traction. They're going to potentially even generate a smaller amount of revenue. Yeah, instead of like go, no, we need to go raise fund, we need to invest a tremendous amount of money in this and taking a bigger risk. Now, this is what is suggested by the lean startup, lean methodology by Eric Ries. Now, I mean, many people would be familiar with what that the methodology is. But this is just an example. Yeah, this is just an example of that. Because if you're dealing with lack of resources or limited resources, which we always are in a way, even if you are well-funded larger corporation, the thing is this idea of goal alignment, aligning your short-term targets with long-term objectives, basically is going to support us, is going to increase the probability of every action that we're taking today brings us closer to the future goals that we have. Breaking things into smaller chunks, taking a more agile, lean way. And that's basically what in the Genesis framework, the framework that we have at then Genesis, like we support people around building the businesses to actually take that quite seriously and break things into smaller chunks and then go from there. Ensure that they are aligning their short term targets with long term objectives. Yeah. Um, Another one would be a flexible resource allocation. So, because what does that sound to your? Let me see how does it sound to your flexible resource allocation? Mhm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. See, good. I mean, like, so let's say we have a software development team, and that's actually like it happens a lot that in the way that we deal with things. So this is not just an idea. This is actually like how we deal with things. So we have a number of people in the team, in the technology team, that they work on client projects. Now, there are times that between this project and another project, there may be some gap, yeah, or the new project that is going to start, there's hurdles, there's barriers. Like we still working with the client, the new client to actually start the project. Now, in the background, we have this product that we are building in house. There's this tool that is being built in house. There's a revenue model and everything around it. So the development team that is allocated to clients' work, um, in the times we can leverage their time and skills. The times that they're not working on the projects, client projects, actually invest that energy, time, and effort and skill in further development of an existing product that we're building in house. So, so this kind of flexible way, now obviously it's not the best, um, um, but when you are dealing with lack of resources, um, then you're going to consider this thing that you're going to be flexible, and in the times that you may have your people sitting on the bench, especially this applies to professional services businesses, consulting businesses, the businesses that your model is tightly linked to the people, like the people, your consultants and your coaches um, are your products. So yeah, so having that preparedness that the times that they don't have something to do on projects, client projects, then they can actually um, work and contribute to an internal project. That could be a kind of an example of, again, flexible resource allocation and the way that we can um, contribute to the short-term goals, which would be that client project that we are focusing on. There's a beginning to it, there's an end to it, and basically we're focusing on client project in this example merely to generate revenue. Yeah, so we're generating revenue, but then our long-term goal is to build our own internal product, and that's basically how you leverage this flexibility of allocating resources. You know, does anything else come to your mind, Enrique? Like how we would manage to balance the long-term objectives with the short-term goals?
Yeah, well, you have to be sure of your objectives, right? You because you're
Hmm.
going to have a lot of freedom to choose what to allocate, what to give attention to. But as the leaders, as those that are driving the company, you have to be sure of your goals. I've been in rooms where goals have been thrown out, and by the end of the session, the initial goals are gone. And you're like, what
Yeah,
happened? They were trying to make sure that the goals that they wanted to were the ones that actually met the determination for the organization. And so
yeah,
once you're there, then you can obviously allocate whatever it is that you need to.
mm, yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah. So another one that it's worth actually talking about is, so we have our academy of coaching, we have our trained coaches, we have our consultants working and working with organizations. And so one misconception that it's there is one misconceptions around leadership development or development in general is this thing that, see, we're quite busy, we're doing all of these projects, we have to do these projects, otherwise like we're going to be financially in danger, etc., etc. So obviously we're going to prioritize those things, those short-term goals. And the misconception is like, oh, we need to have the luxury to actually sit there calmly and focus on our leadership development, as if leadership development or development in general is this thing that we need to put people in the classes, like when we go to school and there's going to be a lecturer or a facilitator sitting there and then teaching them, training them. So it's being seen as a completely separate thing to actual performance that is required to deal with immediate things at hand. The reason I call it misconception, because that's not often the case. I mean, like, you can relate to it if you wish, but that's perhaps not the most effective way to relate to it. Um, when we work with coaches to go, and then the coaches go and work with an organization, with a team, it's not like we go, okay, we need to pause everything you're doing, and then we need to focus on these materials, this basically content that we're going to go through, and we're going to, in isolation, we're going to build teams. That's not how it is. Like, we integrate these two. It's like, no, you have real projects on your desk and you are working on them, as you're working on those projects, basically issues are going to rise. We're going to deal with conflicts. You need to deal with conflict resolutions. Like you need to, there's this kind of miscommunications with the client. The expectations are not managed properly. The expectations are not set from the get-go. The expectations are not being managed properly by the account managers. There is incongruencies with, like, between like your sales team who close the deal and the technical people who are actually checking the feasibility of the projects, and so many other things. Yeah, you have individuals that within the team that they're dealing with family issues, they're dealing with anxiety, they're dealing with their own fears, and whether you like it or not, their mood is going to get involved, and it's going to impact the performance that they have. It's not like, okay, so you put this professional mask on your face and then forget about the heated argument you had at home this morning with your wife, and then or you with your husband or partner, and then coming to work and pretend as if like nothing has happened. So um, and then also creating the mutual language, etc., etc. So it's not like you need to basically just pause everything and work on growth and leadership development, but actually, it's really great to use those s- real scenarios, real world scenarios as you're dealing with them to be facilitated. So there is a leader in the team, but then the leader can leverage the level of coaching, or basically you can get consultants and coaches who are trained professionals who can facilitate these communication issues, conflict resolution matters, um, um, and so on and so forth. So basically, what I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily need to separate these two, and you can actually use real world scenarios as you're dealing with them, and have coaches and consultants working with you and facilitate this growth. And actually, we realized that there's much better result that you can produce out of these real world scenarios than working on case studies or hypothetical problems that so that's another thing that I think we can really take quite seriously, and it's going to support balancing these long-term investments, and still like hitting our immediate targets or short-term gains. Yeah. Now, one last thing I would like to say, and then I'll pass it to you. And then, if you want to add anything, is to actually see things. I know that it sounds simple. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy to implement, to relate to it like that. So often, when it comes to getting something done for someone else, especially within the services companies or professional services companies, or consulting firms, or coaching businesses, we relate to the work as projects, or we package the work that we do with or for the client as a project, meaning that it has a starting point, it has an end point, um, it has the statement of work, it has a scope. We're quite protective so that we don't deal with the scope creep, not letting the scope being expanded, etc. So we basically um, see it as a project, and no matter what methodology you would like to tap into, is it Prince 2, is that waterfall, is it agile, or whatever basically it is, then you follow certain methodologies and methods, yeah, seeing it as a project, and you project manage it. But all of a sudden, when it comes to the internal work that we want to do, particularly when it comes to leadership development or development in general, then we just see it as something that it's not like a project, it's just on the side, it's an ongoing thing, yeah? And that basically um, comes with lots of disadvantages. But the suggestion I would have is not actually relating to all of that, not as an ongoing thing, yeah, because that it can be scary. Oh, how much investment we need to put into this, how much time and energy and everything. this development is required. Okay, so at some point it's going to have some return, but how about now? Can we afford it now? Breaking it into smaller chunks and actually treating them as projects. Okay, so now we're going to have this 3 months project. We're going to have this number of sessions, and we're going to build communications around these things, and we're going to provide training around these things, working with professional coaches, consultants, that they can facilitate those conversations. And then we know, like, this growth, this potential growth that we're actually investing in, it's going to contribute to this, yeah, here and here and here, is going to save us some time, and it's going to remove some wastage. So basically, by turning these ongoing, ambiguous, um, development, um, activities, if we package them into more manageable, projects, and then we go through rounds of these projects, I think that it's going to support us to, uh, set the expectation, know what the tangible values are going to be, and also pause at the end of each project and then see what worked, what didn't work, what was missing, and in a way, through a kind of an iterative process, then we can refine, and we can make it better and better, and so on. So that's what another tangible suggestion I could have, and that's it. So, Enrique, anything else, on this topic that you think it's good for us to pay attention to in balancing short-term targets with the long-term objectives?
Yeah, for leaders, I would suggest that you ask yourself how much are you willing to invest into this for your people. All right, we started with people in the beginning. We're going to end with people at the end because really that is the question. The example I gave you when I was hired into a company, that company literally invested $600 per employee for a year. I mean, that's nothing really for the amount of dedicated mentorship and leadership development that I was able to provide for the whole complement. And so if you can answer for yourself, hey, how much really is this important to me? And then you can come up with a way of how to implement it. The coaching and the side by side scenario is probably ideal because you don't disrupt what you're doing. You're just enhancing the whole complement of people that you have.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I agree. Awesome. So I think we ran out of time for this episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much, everyone. See you in the next episode.